Hey dudes, and welcome back to The Bants. As always, I am your host, The Bants, and it's the middle of the week, so it's time for our second What's Happening in Fashion this week, so let's just get right into it. And first up, as per always, we have our headlines for the day. And in our first headline for the day, as if we weren't already talking about this enough, we're once again losing another head designer from a luxury fashion house, this time in the form of Olivier Lapidus from Lanvin. Like seriously, it's the fashion designer reckoning out there. But I will say, compared to a lot of these other fashion designers that have been leaving their respective houses recently, this one actually makes probably the most sense. I mean, Lanvin hasn't really been doing super well over the last couple years. This is their second designer that they are going away with in just less than 4 years, I believe. And on top of that, they just got bought out by a new company, so this makes even more sense when it's coupled with the fact that they're losing their general manager as well. But personally, I still think this is rather unfortunate. I really did like a lot of Olivier's designs, even for his brief stint with the company, but it just goes to show that no matter how good your designs are, if you can't back them up with sales, then it really doesn't matter. So at the very least, best of luck to both. I really wish the best of luck to Olivier. I think he has a bright future in whatever he decides to design for next. And best of luck to Lanvin. God knows they're going to need it going into whatever happens to be coming next for them. Then, in a very interesting turn of events, Gosha Rubchinskiy just announced on his Twitter that his brand will now be doing away with the whole seasonal design aspect of their clothing line. So what does this mean? Well, in the briefest of terms, instead of doing select clothing runs over the course of the year, in the sense of doing, spring season, summer season, fall, winter, and maybe a couple mid-seasons in there as well, that's all done, and Gosha will now release product whenever he feels it's ready to go out. Now, this concept isn't necessarily new. If you guys remember a couple videos back, one of the fashion articles we talked about at the end of the video talked about this very topic, about how the idea was starting to get thrown around the industry of whether or not seasonal fashion was necessary anymore. And now I guess we kind of get to see whether or not that'll work in, big name scale. And although I do think the idea is interesting, I don't know if necessarily the world is ready for it yet. I mean, there are companies that have done this idea in the past, like as far as big name companies, you got Vetements that kind of runs on whatever fucking schedule they want. And even on the smaller end, pretty much any streetwear company that's ever started at some point has run on a non-seasonal schedule. But if you notice, all these things that both of these high tier and low tier brands have in common is that they're not successful anymore, and it's really hard to maintain that focus when you're not running on a seasonal schedule. So I do wish Gosha the best of luck, and I'm really interested to see how this turns out, because this could be a huge driving factor in the industry for years to come. Alright guys, and with that, let's move on to our art stories for the day. And first up, James Jean showed off some of his newest works at his newest gallery exhibit in Tokyo going on right now. So if you're interested in seeing some more of his new pieces or just learning more about the artist in general, definitely check out some of these photos. Then artist Jason Woodside came together with towel company Slow Tide and created a small collaboration of towels for release as well. And if you kind of want to see a little bit of an introduction to his work, or maybe the towels themselves, they made a quick little video which is worth checking out if you're interested in that sort of thing. And lastly, Juxtapose sat down with artist Mel Kadel for a quick little interview, as well as going over some of her newest pieces from her newest exhibit, which is now going on in LA till the beginning of May. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the artist or see just some of her new works, definitely give this interview a look. And if you happen to be in LA anytime until early May, definitely worth checking out as well too. It's going to be a very cool exhibit. Alright, now moving on into fashion, Dior Homme showed off its pre-fall 2018 lookbook, and honestly, I thought it was pretty well done. And this lookbook is actually rather special, because this is the last lookbook, last design collection we'll see that was Dior Homme done by Chris Van Ash. And honestly, I think it's a great send-off for him. And yes, I know that even though KVA's stint at Dior Homme wasn't perfect, I don't think anybody would disagree on that. What he really excelled in was his suiting, and this just shows here. The silhouettes are absolutely fantastic. They're crisp, they're clean. There's not a lot of use of color, but when it's there, it's bold and bright and it stands out the way it's supposed to. And the one thing I love more than anything else that Chris Van Ash did with his formal wear that a lot of other people didn't is he slowly experimented with it. Like, there are not many people out there that are willing to accessorize a tux or add color to it, add different material to it, add embroidery or patches to it, or even go as far to add glitter or very intricate stitching to it as well. And that is definitely one thing that KVA has never shied away from, and really, in my opinion, was on the front edge of making men's formal wear really exciting again. And even aside from the suiting here, I think the rest of the collection is very quality too. Not too much color, as I said before, so it's not overly abundant. Really nice use of some different materials and some different patterns. And overall, the pieces just look super solid. Some very nice sports pieces, some very nice contemporary pieces. And if there's anything I can say, definitely Chris Van Ash went out with a bang. Then Uniqlo showed off their newest capsule collection, this time in the form of ramen, and honestly, I think it's a very cool idea. It doesn't matter if they're working with other fashion designers, comic book characters, video game characters, anime characters, or even artists like in their SPRZ collection. They always do a really fantastic job when it comes to their collaborations and the graphics associated with them. But some of my favorite capsules they do are kind of the more Japanese-centric ones, such as the one they did recently a season or two ago featuring the Hokusai waves, and of course this ramen one here. And even aside from the graphics, I really like how they kind of go into a couple different styles and even do kind of some mock-ups of things you'd see some of the chefs wear in some of these ramen shops. And overall, if you consider yourself kind of a Japanese foodie, especially on the ramen side, since that tends to be a lot of gateway for a lot of people, I think these would be really fun shirts to have, and once again, for their price point, it's really hard to beat. Then brand Fact showed off their Spring-Summer 2018 lookbook, and I think consistently pretty well done. Now, one thing I always say when I see a lookbook from a streetwear company is please have enough different designs to warrant a lookbook, and thank God Fact does that here. And not only are there a lot of different designs and graphics here, but they're all very different and they all have their own little background ideas and cultural references and even plays on other people's logos and designs. Gee, who would have thought that using the old school style streetwear model to run a business actually would work out successfully? So I really do have to give credit to the young brand there. The only problem I see right now is the same problem I see with a lot of these other new young companies, and it's just a little bit too expensive. Bring everything down, $10, $15, and you've got a completely solid business model in my mind. But at the very least, for now, you do have some solid clothing and some solid designs, and all I gotta say is please keep it up. Then brand Sulvam showed off their Fall/Winter 2018 collection, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, looking at this lookbook, you can definitely see they have a lot of influences here, not necessarily in brand specifically, but more in genres of clothing. Specifically, obviously contemporary wear, classic contemporary wear, some workwear, and even some of this, Euro English rave scene wear that has kind of been on the uptick recently. Fortunately, it doesn't just stop there, because they decided to take a little bit of a different path with it than what you'd normally see in a contemporary brand. And although the concept of deconstruction is by no means new in fashion, let alone in contemporary, the way they decided to deconstruct the pieces here felt a little bit more subtle, a little bit more technical, one of those things that you really have to see up close. It's like they were trying to not really show off that it's deconstructed unless you were really looking for it. And I have to say, I really like that. From somebody that really enjoys deconstruction, I can even honestly admit that sometimes I can see it as a cop-out. Because if you take a boring piece of clothing and then throw some patches on it or some zippers on it, for a lot of people, they can slide by on that alone, and that's kind of boring in my opinion. But seeing the opposite approach taken here, where what comes first and foremost is seeing that the piece is quality from the get-go, and then realizing later on, oh, this is actually reconstructed. That to me, it's really refreshing, it's really cool, and I'd really like to see more of it in the future. So thank you very much, Sulvam, for giving me this breath of fresh air that I really wasn't expecting, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys put out next. Then brand Attempt showed off their Spring/Summer 2018 collection, and even though I like pieces of it, it is a little bit too all over the place. You can also tell here that they do have a lot of other influences as well. You can see that they really enjoy their heavy reconstruction, they enjoy streetwear, and they enjoy techwear too. But just because you enjoy all of these things, and just because you can actually make a lot of these things very well, which they do here, doesn't necessarily mean that you should put them all together in one collection. I would honestly consider all these pieces in this lookbook well above average in terms of design quality, graphics, styling. I think they're all really well done, but they just don't work together at all. And it just feels like somebody took a bunch of different bits and pieces from a slew of different brands and tried to put them together into one lookbook and call it one brand. And it's just too disjointed. With that said, however, if they decide to go on any one of these three paths for their next season, even if it's just for one season and they decide to cycle in between all three, or hell, if they even just took away maybe one of those ideas, just take out one of those three concepts and hybrid the other two, any of these ideas, any of these options could lead to a really sick lookbook in the future. And I really hope at the very least they take one of those concepts and just refine it, because they could really put together a solid lookbook if they tried. And lastly, South Korean brand Iise showed off their newest collections lookbook, and I really enjoyed it. Iise has always been consistently pretty good when it comes to their designs over the last couple of seasons, and that once again continues here. And for a brand that normally just sticks to mainly techwear and activewear, they decided to kind of mix things up a little bit this time around and just lightly flirt with some contemporary ideas, and I think it works. The muted tones and the colorways they chose, along with the really subtle patterns that aren't overly animated and just kind of work with some of the graphic ideas on some of the more athletic pieces, kind of just seems together flawlessly. And to see this kind of idea of taking activewear and complementing it with contemporary wear is something I never thought would work as well as it does here. So shoutouts once again, as always, to Iise. You guys always bring something a little bit new and exciting to the table, and as per usual, I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for us next. Alright, and finally let's move on to our articles for the day. And first up, Hypebeast sat down with young but still relatively renowned designer Craig Green for a quick interview. So if you want to learn a little bit more about where he feels the brand is going, then I would definitely give this a read. Then Highsnobiety put out a nice little article kind of going over the history between Mark Gonzales and Supreme. And if you consider yourself a fan of skateboard history, or even early streetwear history, or maybe you're just a fan of the Gons in general, this is definitely worth reading, even if it is a little bit on the shorter side. Then Hypebeast put out another small, interesting little article kind of going over this idea of whether or not tie-dye will finally stick around or not this time. And they kind of go over a little bit of the history of it and a little bit of the attempts people have done and some of the more interesting items that have been tie-dyed over the years. So if you're interested in kind of trends and what might or might not be popular in the coming seasons, definitely give this a look. And lastly, Grail did another nice write-up / history of, this time on Givenchy's menswear. So if you remember with the passing of Hubert a couple weeks ago, Hypebeast did their own little article on some of the more, interesting or high points of the Givenchy career, but if you're more interested in the menswear aspect of it, this is definitely worth reading. Very informative. Alright guys, and with that we wrap up the second whip for the week. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And as always, if you want to see some more images from more lookbooks that I didn't include in this video, or want to read some of the articles I talked about, I've linked all those in the description down below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like. And if you're new here, we do this 3 times a week, plus the occasional other special video. So if you enjoy that kind of content, feel free to subscribe and stick around for more. And otherwise, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to talk fashion in general, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I'm always willing to talk fashion. And once again, guys, thank you as always for watching these videos and supporting this content. I hope you guys have a good couple days until I see you next. And as always, until next time.